Cavanagh, please do it.
Hi. First, I don't know why Mr. Merriman was staring me down when he was talking about the UFT. Just so you know, I am a teacher and therefore a member of the UFT, but I am not in the UFT leadership. I've never been a chapter leader. I've never even been to a UFT meeting, so I am not some shill for the UFT as he just tried to paint me to be. I also would just raise the issue, what he was just discussing about the UFT not standing up for apparently Dream or something on the 5th floor. There's a social worker here from PS 241 in Harlem, and their kindergarten, first and second graders are in a sub-level basement because Eva Moskowitz at the Harlem Success Academy refused to have her children in a sub-level basement. And the other day, their boiler overheated, the children were evacuated. So, anyway, I will revert back to my prepared statements. Thank you, Community Board 12. Thank you, Faye, who I've had the pleasure of speaking with over the last several weeks. Pamela, the chair, thank you so much. And to everybody from the community who's here today. I stand here as nothing more and nothing less than a teacher. I have no political motivation or aspiration. I already mentioned myself in the context of the union. And because I'm a teacher, I believe I have a moral imperative to serve my students, their parents, and their community. And I believe that it's my responsibility to bear witness to the realities on the ground in our public schools and to advocate for the real reforms that could improve the children that I serve. I've served the Red Hook community in Brooklyn for a decade. I've taught 5th and 4th grade children in a 12 to 1-to-1 self-contained classroom for 9 of those years. And I moved down to a K1 and 2 class this year for children with intellectual disabilities for 2 reasons. One, because I was sick and tired of being complicit in the high-stakes testing game, which I feel is basically the systematic abuse of our children. And also because I wanted to get back to my roots of providing equitable access for education to children with more severe disabilities. Our school, PS 15, is nestled in the heart of Red Hook, which is home to one of the largest housing projects in New York City. And we've made tremendous strides over the last 10 years in educating our children. We went from being on a state watch list to now receiving awards for educating special needs learners, English language learners, and for closing the achievement gap. We've received 4 consecutive A ratings on our New York City progress reports, and that matters to a lot of people, but to me what really matters is that our school is a center of community where health, dental, emotional, physical, and academic needs are met. I believe very strongly in our school model, which is responsive to the community that we serve, is filled with staff collaboration, professional development, and the practices of small class sizes, school-based curriculum, I mentioned professional development, strong community partnerships, and we don't narrow our curriculum. We go well beyond the ELA and math requirements and have a strong focus on the arts. We're not perfect, but we strive to create a magical place with high academic rigor where children will come back to us long after they leave us. Unfortunately, this is not the direction that the Department of Education has taken with schools citywide over the last 8 years. We've seen class sizes increase. We've seen our school-based budget slashed by over $400 million just in the last 2 years. We've seen our schools closed and co-located. We've seen an overemphasis on testing and millions wasted on ineffective merit pay schemes, millions wasted on no-bid contracts, and millions wasted on contracts that quite literally stole our children's money or provided us with faulty or unuseful services. And I say our children deserve better. The greatest city in the world deserves an equitable and quality public school system, and we are falling short. The grassroots education movement, of which I am a member, has identified 10 real reforms that we believe would transform our public education system. And those reforms include smaller class sizes, parent and educator empowerment, culturally relevant curriculum, excellent public schools that serve all children, anti-racist education policies, qualified and experienced educators and educational leaders, more teaching, less testing, expanded pre-K and early intervention programs, democratic and social justice unionism, and equitable funding for our schools. In specific to charter schools, which I know is a focus here today, I've already told you about my school. Well, in 2008, our school community was blindsided when we were forced to co-locate with a charter school. At the time, I didn't understand the outrage. Many families and teachers fought, but I sat on the sidelines. I thought, there's another elementary school in Red Hook that's really not performing that well. We have a few classrooms that we could give up for 2 years, which was the promise that was made to us. We used them, but we wouldn't die without them. And I thought choice was a good thing, right? I was very wrong. I don't say this because I don't believe in choice. I say this because our community was given no choice. At the centerpiece of the proliferation of charter schools is the idea of choice, but the question is choice for whom? Are we creating choice by privileging some needs over those of others? Are we creating choice when we don't listen to the needs and the desires of the community? And more importantly, are we creating choices at all? The idea of choice for parents is not inherently tied to competition. But for the charter school agenda here in New York City, choice and competition go hand in hand. And it is an ideology and a strategy that is destroying our schools and destroying our communities. The other centerpiece of support behind charter schools, as was mentioned already here, was that they were supposed to be centers of innovation that would lift up our public schools and that would serve students and communities that had long been denied access to the promise of an equitable education. One of the biggest regrets I have is that many of us did not join my community in fighting from the beginning of the authorization of the charter school in our community. Because I have learned that this is not about choice, and it's certainly not about equity. In the beginning of the school year of the fall of 2008, when our co-location began, it quickly became apparent that there was going to be some problems. We learned that our neighbors had no intention of leaving, and we learned that they didn't have the intention of being cooperative and friendly neighbors. We called the DOE to make sure that this was in fact going to be 2 years. They assured us yes. We called the UFT to protect us and our kids. They talked to the DOE. They assured us yes. Later that spring, we woke up to a newspaper article that the founders of our charter school were asking for an extension for 5 more years. I could spend hours talking about the experiences that we faced from that time until today. Our families and our community were consistently lied to. Thousands of hours and resources and dollars went into navigating the Department of Education, the legal process, and educating and organizing and mobilizing not only our school, but communities citywide, because our school, along with 188, were the first to face this new process under the change in school utilization law under mayoral control. What we learned was shocking. The initial 2-year pitch given to communities, commonplace for that to be pitched, and then the charters asked for extensions after. We learned that Bloomberg and the Department of Education wanted to replace half of existing public schools with charter schools. We learned that the proliferation of charter schools was beginning a nationwide agenda, and that the financial industry and hedge fund millionaires and billionaires were largely behind the funding of these schools. We learned about footprints and utilization formulas that did not take into account the over 30% special education students in our building, allocating no space for their services, no space for their testing accommodations, not to mention no consideration for our English language learners, for our enrichment programs, for our intervention programs, for our students who receive therapy and wraparound services. Apparently, their space needs didn't matter. But most importantly, what we learned is no matter what our parents said, no matter what our community said, no matter what evidence we presented, we were completely ignored by the Department of Education. Now there are a new group of folks who want to start yet another charter school in Red Hook. This would make the 4th elementary school in a 1.1 mile square radius with 2 existing public schools that are already, quote, underutilized, and the charter school that's in our building that just received $30 million from the Department of Education to build a brand new building in our neighborhood. This new charter school is what one parent recently referred to as a new trend in gated community charter schools. Because this charter school is shopping itself to the new gentrified Red Hook. Parents who feel a little bit uncomfortable about sending their kids to a school that only has less than 5% white kids. This is not choice, and this is not equity. I've learned more about charter schools in the last 2 years than I could have ever wanted to learn, and I'm going to share some of those very specifics with you now. And I want to credit this data to a few people. Molly, who is a friend of mine, a teacher, a member of the grassroots education movement, thank goodness she has a love of data, and she spent a lot of time combing the DOE's own website to mine a lot of this data. Juan Gonzalez, who's done some great work. A few studies which I will mention specifically, and some other reporting by Gotham Schools and WNYC. First, according to the Independent Budget Office, 2 out of 3 charter schools are co-located in public school buildings. Charter schools that are co-located receive more per pupil student funding than the schools that they are sited in. This is not equity. According to one of the latest studies of New York City Charter Schools released this January, which is called Adding Up the Spending, Fiscal Disparities, and Philanthropy Among New York City Charter Schools, which was produced by the National Education Policy Center at the University of Chicago. They report that, contrary to the narrative that charters in New York City are getting better results with less money, the exact opposite is true. In fact, these charter schools are not underfunded, and in many cases, their resources far exceed their local public schools. And in addition, when you control for population differences and environmental factors, there is no statistical difference between 4th, 6th, and 7th grade standardized test scores, and in fact, charter schools' 5th grade students underperform public school students. Last year on the New York City progress reports, the mayor and the Department of Education's own progress reports, guess who did better? Public schools. High quality choices. Let's go more local and focus on nearby Harlem Success chain of schools and Harlem Children's Zone. Let's talk about funding and financial oversight. Over a 2-year period, Harlem Success Academy has spent $1.3 million on marketing. That amounts to about $1,100 per child. Now let's compare this with what the DOE spends on our kids. $74 per child on books, software, and libraries. $388 per child for food. $287 for supplies and furniture. $343 for transportation. A grand total for all of those things of $1,092, less than what Harlem Success Academy is spending per child on glossy brochures and posters. Is this equity? Is this real or manufactured choice? With zero education experience, Eva Markowitz pays herself over $300,000, while Mr. Walcott, who serves many more children, makes less than Kathy Black's $250,000. Canada, too, makes far more. Jeffrey Canada, that is. Both schools receive millions in private funds that have benefited from access to public property at no cost. Most recently, Harlem Children's Zone is giving a piece of the Nicholas Housing Projects and $60 million in funds to build their school. The mayor and the papers boasted this school would be like no other. That kids could, in between classes, they could get their cavities filled. I guess they never visited my school's dental clinic that the speech therapist shares in between filling cavities. They boasted about the 2-story public library and the dance room this new school would have. I guess they didn't go and look at their own utilization formulas that deny those kind of spaces to our public school students. This is outrageous inequity. But even more outrageous equities lie in how charters versus public schools serve our neediest students. Citywide, charters serve 57% of students who receive free lunch. 68% are served in public schools. Citywide, public schools serve 14.3% children who are English language learners. Charter schools serve 5%. Citywide special education numbers and charter special education numbers are very difficult to extract because IEPs are not created equal, individualized education plans. We just have them classify children with special needs. If you get speech once a week, you have an IEP. If you have severe cognitive disability in a full year program, you have IEPs. So it's very difficult to figure this out. There are averages as high as 16% citywide for IEPs for public schools and as low as 9% for charter schools. But again, there's a lot of inequity in that because we can't pull out the populations that these schools are serving. So we broke it down for Harlem Success Academy and for Harlem Children's Zone and compared them with either the schools that they're co-located with or with nearby district schools. Harlem Success Academy 1, 2, and 3% of their children in CTT, collaborative team teaching, 0 in self-contained. In the 3 schools that they're co-located with, they have 11% in CTT, 9% in self-contained at 149. At PS30, 27% in CTT and 14% in self-contained. And at 375, 14% in CTT. Harlem Children's Zone has 0 children in collaborative team teaching or in self-contained. One of their schools is co-located with a school that's actually facing closure, and they have 21 out of 333 of their students in a self-contained class that's Choir Academy. Both schools, by the way, both charter schools have schools that are co-located in buildings that face closure. Finally, let's talk about attrition. Students who leave or get bumped out or pushed out by charter schools. My time is up. I'm just going to finish this one point really quick if nobody minds. Attrition is a big issue. I won't go into the data. We can talk about it during questioning. But what you see with the attrition numbers is not only is there disproportionately high attrition, but that it coincides with their school's achievement data. So as the children leave, their test scores go up. And I'll just leave you with saying that, this data shows this is not about equity, this is not about choice. And if we really want those things, we need to demand real reform right now for our children.
You said
they don't. You do not have to comply with the law.
And it would help if you sent out another letter and say, we encourage you to do that because personally for me, it's going to cost me a lot of money to go up and down to Albany again to have them cut and paste it and put it there and go through all of that. We shouldn't have to do that. You should say, as a show of good faith to your school, say, you know what, the Lord, but you know what, let your parents have their PAs.
I just want to say on that point, the reason beyond the expense that it costs parent advocates to do that is Kim Irby tells this story all the time. She's a former charter school parent. She actually tells it in our film.
Yes.
A group of parents at the Uncommon School chain tried to start a parent association, and they were sent a cease and desist order by Uncommon.
Yes.
You can't do that. And our legal team says so. And the school literally legally stopped the parents from having a PTA. And that's crazy to me. And I just also have to say, you talked about the co-location thing and charter schools don't have brick and mortar money. I mean, first of all, Lisa, talked about the capital plan money. I mean, I talked about it in my opening. They're getting millions of dollars to build their own schools, but in addition to that, they get tons of private funding that public schools do not have access to and are not getting. And as I mentioned, the IBO report says that the co-located schools actually get more per pupil funding
Then there's a second part of that report that came out, and after they had redone the calculation and said in fact there wasn't a disparity. And so honestly, so my take on it is that it's unclear.
But I'm just saying, you know, to be fair to the people who are here, to say that, you know, charter schools don't have access to brick and mortar money, which is why they need co-locations. The real reason that they need co-locations, in my opinion, is that, you know, it's an easy business startup. You know, it's an easy business startup for them that is hurting our kids. And one of the things that I think SUNY should do as a responsible authorizer is put a tremendous amount of pressure on the DOE, if they are going to continue with the co-location policy, to revise their footprint utilization formula to make it equitable for children. To have a policy in the Department of Education where you are not accounting for an entire group of children's services is absolutely unconscionable. And our parents appealed to the state education commissioner on our issue because we do have a 37% special education population at our school, and the DOE said in their affidavits and our complaint that we're not required to provide space for speech and PT and OT and testing accommodations. And that's outrageous that they would put that out publicly like that and say, well, that's not our problem, and give that space to children in charter schools. And as a responsible authorizer, you guys should be doing something about it.
So as a responsible authorizer,